Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for a deep dive? We're tackling Charles Darwin today.
Oh, a fascinating choice.
But we're going beyond those finches. We're going to really dig into who he was as a person.
His life.
Yeah, using excerpts from a biography.
You know, his personal journey is really intertwined with his scientific work.
It wasn't just like, evolution. And I think that makes him even more interesting.
I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Like how many of us were told, put down the bugs, do your homework.
You're right.
Well, young Charles was all about nature.
Not the best student.
The biography even quotes his dad worrying he'd be a disgrace because he loved, get this, shooting, dogs, and rat catching.
Can you imagine the father of evolution? Almost a family disappointment. But I wonder, maybe all that time outdoors, away from school, helped him think differently.
Oh, interesting.
Like he wasn't stuck in that rigid structure, so he observed things more freely.
It's a good point. And then there's his start in medicine at Edinburgh.
Sensible choice, right? Family of scientists.
But the biography says he couldn't stand the sight of blood.
Not a good surgeon then.
Not ideal.
So from doctor to clergyman, that's a big leap.
Well, back then, the church was respectable, stable,
His dad probably pushed for that.
likely.
But even at Cambridge, Darwin was drawn to natural history.
Metabotany professor John Stephens Henslow.
Henslow, the mentor who saw what others missed, right?
Absolutely.
And got him on the HMS Beagle.
Now that's where things get exciting.
Ugh.
5 years, traveling the world, seeing amazing biodiversity.
You'd think, boom, that's when evolution hit him.
It's what we're often led to believe.
Darwin and those finches, classic image.
But it's more complicated.
Really?
The Beagle voyage was crucial, no doubt. But Darwin was so meticulous, gathering data, but taking his time.
So not a eureka moment.
Not instant, no. In fact, the finches weren't even properly identified at first.
Seriously?
It was only back in England, talking to an ornithologist named John Gould, that the beak's significance became clear.
Wow, so the textbook version is simplified.
Let's say that. It was years of work, collaboration.
Mind-blowing.
Yeah.
This huge scientific idea, it was gradual, not a sudden flash.
Exactly. And that deliberate pace, it continues after the Beagle.
Darwin comes home, marries Emma Wedgwood.
His cousin, yes.
Hold on, wasn't marrying your cousin a bit,
It was more common then, but yeah, it raises eyebrows.
And Emma was deeply religious.
Think about that conflict. Darwin's theory challenging everything, even his own marriage.
Huge internal pressure. This groundbreaking idea, but worried about his wife's faith.
The biography suggests this delayed his publishing. Instead, he dove into years of research.
On what?
Barnacles, pigeons, seemingly unrelated things.
Pigeons. What could those possibly tell him about evolution?
It seems like a detour, but he was building his credibility.
Smart.
While wrestling with his theory's implications, he became known as a top-notch researcher.
Preparing for the storm, so to speak.
His friends, they joked he should be called Barnacle Darwin.
I love that. Can you picture him? Surrounded by specimens, totally focused while they tease him.
He wasn't just a serious scientist, there was humor there too.
But then along comes Alfred Russel Wallace.
A rival, developing similar ideas to natural selection.
Oh, Darwin's in trouble now.
Imagine his surprise, years of caution,
Yeah.
and suddenly someone else is about to publish the same thing.
I'd be rushing to print. But Darwin wasn't like that.
What did he do?
Well, he and Wallace presented their findings together to the Linnean Society.
A true sign of their integrity.
Remarkable. But it must lit a fire under Darwin.
No more waiting.
Which brings us to November 24th, 1859. On the Origin of Species hits the world.
The landmark date.
What reactions did he get? This wasn't just science. It challenged how people saw life itself.
He knew that. In the book, he avoids directly talking about human evolution, but the implications were clear. The world was about to change.
And that feels like a good place to pause for now. From a childhood in nature to the brink of publishing this revolutionary theory, what a journey.
And it's only just beginning.
Welcome back. Last time we left Darwin about to rock the world with On the Origin of Species.
Which, by the way, is still making waves in science today.
It's incredible, a theory from the 1800s, still so relevant.
It speaks to how powerful his ideas were, based on solid research.
Natural selection, right. The idea that creatures better suited to their environment thrive.
Exactly. It's a cornerstone of biology now, from genetics to, well, everything.
It's so elegant, explaining how life is so diverse.
And Darwin didn't just look at individual animals, he saw the importance of variety within species.
Right, like not every bird is the same, even in the same flock.
And that's key for adaptation. It's not just survival of the fittest in a brute force way,
More like survival of the most adaptable to whatever changes come along.
which makes you think about climate change, right? Darwin's ideas are super relevant now.
Totally. Understanding how life adapts is crucial if we want to protect it.
Darwin gives us the framework to study this, to make informed decisions.
So cool how a theory from so long ago helps us with today's problems.
But Darwin's impact goes even beyond biology, into human behavior, even philosophy.
How did he bridge all that? It seems like different worlds.
Well, one of his big contributions was the idea of common descent.
That we all share an ancestor way back.
It wasn't just science, it challenged the whole worldview back then. Humans weren't special anymore, we were connected to everything.
Like that famous tree of life image with all the branches.
Exactly. At first people resisted, of course.
But now we have DNA, fossils, all supporting this idea.
By comparing creatures, we trace those relationships back in time.
It's mind-blowing. But then, how did all that diversity come about? If we're
Mhm.
all related, how did things get so different?
That's where Darwin's super detailed work shines. He wasn't just theorizing, he was observing nature up close.
He was obsessed with orchids, right? Not what you typically think of with Darwin.
Orchids are complex, their structures, how they get pollinated. It was a living lab for him.
So even in a flower, he saw evolution playing out.
He even predicted a moth with a super long tongue, just based on one orchid.
And was he right?
Years later, that moth was found, showing how deeply he understood adaptation.
Like a scientific detective story. But he didn't stop at plants and animals.
He wrote, "The expression of the emotions in man and animals, tackling our feelings."
He thought emotions were evolved too, not just divine gifts or something.
He argued they had biological roots, shaped by the same forces as our bodies.
So fear, anger, all that, it helped our ancestors survive.
And he saw expressing emotions as communication, important for social creatures.
Makes you see feelings differently. Not just fleeting things, but tied to our deep history.
It's the basis for evolutionary psychology, which is still going strong.
But then, Darwin also studied earthworms. For years.
See, even in the mundane, he found complexity.
I still chuckle at that image. But it's inspiring too.
He saw in those worms a miniature version of evolution at work. Their behavior, how they changed the soil.
He found the grand scheme of things in something so tiny.
And that's the takeaway. Life isn't isolated. We're all in this web of relationships affecting each other.
Like now, with climate change, we can't ignore that web.
Darwin basically set the stage for ecology as a field. It's not just about competition, but cooperation, balance in ecosystems.
This deep dive has been eye-opening. From orchids to worms, Darwin's legacy is huge.
It's still unfolding as we find new evidence, new ways to interpret his work.
But what's key is his commitment to science itself. Observing, questioning, always open to new information.
That spirit is what matters most.
I gotta say, I thought we'd be all about finches and survival of the fittest, but this has been so much broader.
It's the thing about Darwin. His curiosity just led him everywhere.
And we've barely scratched the surface.
Oh, there's always more to discover.
So, what hidden gems are we digging up in this final part? What haven't we covered yet?
Well, we've talked about Darwin challenging that idea that humans are separate from nature, above it all.
Right, not just putting us on the evolutionary tree, but what it means.
And that goes way beyond just our bodies evolving.
You're talking the descent of man now, right? Where he tackles us head on.
Yeah. And he didn't shy away from our minds, our moral sense evolving too.
So like empathy, cooperation, even knowing right from wrong, it's not from God, but from our ancestors needing those traits.
That was radical, even for scientists back then.
Did they push back on that?
Oh, some argued human minds are just too complex, couldn't be from natural selection.
But Darwin, he was always looking for connections, not just dividing lines.
Exactly. And he compared us to other animals, which now we know is spot on.
Like, animals use tools, they solve problems, some even seem to care for each other.
And Darwin saw hints of that way back then.
Amazing how ahead of his time he was. But then he also got into our emotions specifically.
With that book, The Expression of Emotions in Man and Animals, did you know he actually experimented on himself?
Wait, what? How do you experiment on emotions?
Well, he'd, deliberately make himself scared and observe the physical changes.
That's dedication.
But he found that even babies, across cultures, have similar expressions.
So, like, a smile means the same thing no matter where you're from.
He thought it was all about communication, vital for survival.
It's crazy to think our feelings are tied to how we evolved. Like, anger helped us back in the day.
And that laid the groundwork for understanding things like, why do we get jealous? It all has roots.
But even with all that, he still spent years on earthworms.
Right. Never underestimate the power of the mundane.
I gotta admit, it makes me smile, but it's also, deeply humbling.
He saw the whole story of life playing out in those little creatures, how they changed the soil, even the landscape over time.
So it's like zoom in on a worm and you see the big picture too.
And that's the lesson, isn't it?
Mm.
We're all connected. Darwin saw that so clearly.
Yeah, we're part of nature, not separate from it.
And that's never been more important than now, with all the environmental challenges we face.
This whole deep dive, it's been like a new lens to look at the world through.
And it's not just about Darwin's answers, but the way he asked questions.
That never-ending curiosity, being open to being wrong, that's what made him great.
And it's what we need more of today.
Yeah.
So go out there, observe, ask your own questions, find the wonder in unexpected places, even in a worm.
What a way to wrap things up. Thanks to everyone for joining us on this Darwinian journey. It's been a privilege to explore his world, and I hope you've learned something new along the way. Until next time, keep exploring.